Hi there everyone, my name is Chris Unwin and I'm a solution architect with Redgates Software. Now today I'm going to show you how to use Data Masker for SQL Server to mask unique identifiers, specifically these pesky GUIDs here before you. Let's just zoom in and see what we have here. So down here on the Doggos Are Neat Inc. database, you'll notice that I have a table called Cute Dog Rating. Now on this table, Cute Dog Rating, you'll also notice that I have both an annoying primary key, which happens to be a unique identifier, and a pesky ID, which is just a regular unique identifier. Now these values are present here. I've only got 3 example values here in the table, and it's these that I'm going to want to update using Data Masker. Now the problem with this is that these unique identifiers can't easily be masked with a regular substitution rule. If I come into the Data Masker interface and I pick my pesky ID, you'll notice that we have no options. We can't actually set them to null because that will fail, obviously being a unique identifier, so we only have the option of doing nothing. Or do we? Well, what we're actually going to do is we're going to use a function specifically to mask them, an inbuilt function. Now we know that the way that these GUIDs can be generated into the unique identifier is the new ID function. Now if we want to use a function like that in Data Masker to mask a value, then we can't use one of the basic masking rules. We'll need to use a row internal synchronization rule. This allows us to specify a certain amount of T-SQL, including everything from a case statement to functions that we may need. Now I can go ahead and pick our pesky ID unique identifier column, and then instead of assigning it a data set, what I'm going to do is just use the new ID function. We can create that row internal rule, and that should now mask those values. Let's go ahead and run this masking set. So the run of the masking rules was successful. Let's keep an eye here on the pesky ID. So the first one, 0C30. If we now re-execute, you'll notice that we now have 3DF67. So we've managed to mask that GUID. But what about when the GUID is a unique identifier and the primary key? Well, that's ever so slightly different, and we'll need a slightly different rule. So let's delete this rule for now. And we'll follow through the same process. So we need to create a sync rule, a row internal sync rule specifically. And we're going to point it at the annoying primary key, that GUID we need to mask, and we'll still specify new ID. What we're going to do now that's ever so slightly different though, is we're going to come to the options tab. We're going to come to the where clause specifically, and we need to set it to no where clause because we don't want it doing a comparison. We then also need to come to change managers, and we're actually going to convert our rule into what we call a synchronization manager. You can watch more about synchronization managers and primary and foreign key masking on Redgate University. For now though, I'm just going to convert the rule to a synchronization manager. You'll notice as part of this process, we are creating a temporary table, populating that temporary table with all of the distinct values from the primary key. We're then mapping them to masked values. And then we are disabling the foreign key and primary key constraints, synchronizing back out in a fanning motion, and then re-enabling those constraints. Now this is particularly helpful where we also need to synchronize to any foreign keys that we may have within the database. Now if you come to rule generation by foreign key, you can then add those tables and update the synchronization manager. For me though, I only have the one table that needs masking, specifically that primary key, so I'm just going to stick with that one rule. If we now run this masking set, you'll notice the run of the masking rules was successful. And if we now take a look at our annoying primary key, instead of F28B5, we now have 794699. And that is how you can mask a unique identifier in your SQL Server tables with Data Masker for SQL Server. For other videos and other helpful tips, check out Redgate University. Thanks for stopping by.